extraordinary than just the regular guidelines. But anybody who's scared, they can always join verses as we're doing right now via the internet hookup, and we are live right now. Okay, good. We are live. We're going to get this hooked up. Regarding missing minions, so anyone who cannot make it to minyan for these or other reasons, so it's brought in Shulchan Aruch, they should try to daven at the same time as the minyan. So if this is your local minyan that you usually go to, so you would try to daven every day at 8:30. And that would be considered, that's the second best way of davening with the minyan. The first best is to actually be in the room. But the second best is if you can't make it to the room, to at the very least daven at the same time, and it's a second level of davening with a minyan. It's considered you're davening with a minyan, but not to the same level as when you're in the same room. Don't try this during the regular year, by the way. This is just for, when you can't make it. Regarding mikveh, so as far as understood, they closed all the mikvahs here, correct? I don't know if that Arizal's mikveh was closed. I have a mikveh in my house, so I'm actually gonna fill it up in Eretz Shem today. So I have a personal mikveh to use. But for all those who don't, then the following is the halachic approach to that, and that is as follows. There's two reasons for why men toivel in a mikveh. One is for additional purity, Tara to Sefes Tara, while the second is for to remove oneself from the state of Balkari. And regarding the state of Balkari, it suffices in a case of need, such as what we are right now experiencing, to take a shower for about 3-4 minutes. Hot water, cold water, it doesn't matter. The idea is to stay under the shower head straight, consecutively. That is considered, it takes the place of mikveh. It's considered like you went to the mikveh. Regarding Balkari, regarding Tosefes Tara, there is no shower alternative, meaning those who want to do it like they go every single day for additional purity, they go on Shabbos for additional purity. The shower won't work for that. The only thing that will work is to immerse in a body of water. If you have a pool, then good. Most people don't have pools here in Sfas, at least not personal ones. Probably the bathtubs aren't large enough to be filled with water so you can immerse, so that's also a problem. So that's it. There's nothing to do. Regarding that, there's nothing really to do. The only option that you can do, which is, as I said, a little bit ka'ain, it's sort of, it can bring some spiritual benefits similar to that of mikvah, is to wash your hands the following way. You wash your hands in the morning for Tosefes Tara, a total of 40 times corresponding to the 40 saw. So that's, if we do it like this, I'm showing you, okay? You fill up the cup, you put in your right hand to left hand as you always, and then you pour the following. Yud, Yud. You don't say, you think in your mouth. You're basically saying Yud Ke Vav Ke, but you can't say Hashem's name, right? So this is all in the mind. Yud, Yud, Vav, Vav, Ke, Ke. I'm sorry, you spell out the Yud. So it's Yud, Yud, Vav, Vav, Dalet, Dalet. That's Yud. And then then you have, after Yud, you have the Hey, which is Hey Aleph. So you do Hey, Hey, Aleph, Aleph. For every single letter of the Tetragrammaton of Hashem's name, you pour 1 time. And there's a total of 10, and we're doing by each hand, so that's 20. If you spell out Yud Ke Vav Ke, right, Yud, Vav, Dalet, then we have the Hey Aleph, and then we have Vav, Aleph, Vav, and again, the Hey Aleph. So it's total 10 letters. Each letter is 1 pouring on each hand, so that's 20 already. And then we do consecutively Yud, Vav, Dalet, another 10, another 10 of Yud, and that's 40. This is brought in Kabbalah. In Sifrei Kabbalah, it's brought in the Kaf HaChaim. This is one method of doing it. Another method takes a little more time to study Maseches Mikvahs. Open up a Mishnayos and study Maseches Mikvahs. In the beginning, it'll take some time, but you'll eventually get used to it. It'll go a little quicker. I have to turn this on now.
Jeff, I had an end at the end, but we could eat it.
That's why the nun was larger in the parsha this past week. Take the nun out there and she could feed. Now I finally figured it out.
Here. Joseph, did you have a workbook? Yeah.
Remember when we used to have a Chevy Vega?
Yeah.
Okay, guys, here we are.
Doesn't help.
Okay. A few more things and we'll begin our scheduled learning. Again, regarding the coronavirus. Regarding tefillah, so of course everyone should add in their personal prayers to Hashem to end this crisis, both economic and of course medical. And Parshas HaKteiros is a very, very important. It's a very important medicine towards Magefis, as we know from the Parsha of Kairach, what happened with the Magef and Kairach, that Aaron was told to make the Keteiros. And throughout the generations, it was Gedolei Yisrael always implemented the recital of Parshas HaKteiros whenever there was a time of danger or of plague. So we do this. We say this every single morning and afternoon by Mincha. It should be said with extra kavana for this purpose of eradicating the Magefa. I'll mention that Rabbi Akiva Eger, in the times of Rabbi Akiva Eger, there was the famous cholera epidemic, and this is in 1837. I'm sorry, I think it was 1860s or 70s. Anyways, so he came out with a number of different edicts for the community, and I'm going to read you some of the things that he wrote to the community to keep during this time. First, he said that there shouldn't be more than 15 people in shul for minyan, and he arranged with the local police that the policemen would be guarding the entrance to the shul to make sure not more than 15 people were inside, and they wouldn't let them in. So this time the saying that, "Oh, I don't go to that shul because of the rabbi," took a literal meaning. He also told everybody to boil all their drinking water, to keep very particular on their hygiene, clean their homes well, have a lot of open windows. And he basically said that everybody has to follow the directives of the doctors, and anyone who doesn't, he writes the following: anyone who transgresses the words of the doctors is considered a sinner to God, and his sin is very, very great. He also told the community that anyone who breaks the isolation rules, that needs to be isolated, should be dealt with very harshly, and they should be immediately told on to the authorities. Akiva Eger likewise made this edict regarding Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. Of course, everybody wants to come to shul. He said you can't have more than 50 people in the minyan, Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, and he made a goyrel for who would be zoicha to go. There was a lottery of who would be able to participate, and that's how it was decided. Parshas HaKteiros, as we said earlier, he said that everybody should say this, and he said everybody should drink a hot cup of tea or coffee before Shacharis. Back then, people used to not eat anything or drink anything before Shacharis except water. So he said for purposes of health, everybody should drink a hot drink before davening. On Yom Kippur, he set it up as follows, that there are going to be 2 doctors in the shul, and anybody who begins feeling any feeling of sickness or illness, even a common cold or sneezing attack, he immediately has to go to the doctors to be checked, and they would give him either according to Shiur to eat and drink, or he would just eat fully. And Rabbi Eger said that anyone who doesn't listen to this will be excommunicated and will be severely punished if they continue fasting and not go to the doctors that were set up in shul. As Mir Hashem, our situation won't reach the severity of this situation. This situation was very bad. He, in his community of Posen, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of men, women, and children who died due to this epidemic. So God willing, the severity will never reach anywhere near this. But nonetheless, this is already a precedent that we see in one of the Gedolei Yisrael, Akiva Eger, of how he dealt with it. Okay, we are today beginning a new subject, Boneh v'Seiser. Boneh v'Seiser is the second chapter. You should see it in your book. I believe it's page 40-something. 55, okay. In your module that you see right here, you won't yet have access to this page. Let me just show you exactly how this works.
Is it though?
55. A good way to remember is 55 is Nun Hey. Nun Hey stands for not here. Many are not here today. Okay, so you see right here on the look on the screen, Makabeh Patish, this is what you have access to right now. It's open. Okay, once a student takes a test and gets a 70, he's then able to access the next section. We are ready, right? So usually the way it's done is that the test should have been done last week, but with everything going on, the pandemonium of Purim and this whole crisis, so I didn't put up the test till last night. So bottom line is that it's a little late, but you'll do it this week. Once it's done, you'll then have access to the next section of Boneh v'Seiser. You'll see the learning curriculum. This is right now where we are in this video classes and PowerPoints. Okay, so in the second chapter of the subject of building and destroying deals with the Kali Malacha of Metaken Maneh, of Tikkun Kli, of Makabeh Patish, which is Boneh v'Seiser. As we mentioned in our first class, it is listed as a separate and individual Malacha outside of Makabeh Patish, even though they kind of seem similar. Nonetheless, they are distinct malachis, both biblical prohibitions, both one of the 49, and it has its own criteria. It has its own conditions of when it's transgressed. As we're going to go through, there are cases that are under biblical prohibition, cases under rabbinical prohibition, and cases that are permitted. In this, what's unique about this malacha, as opposed to Makabeh Patish, there is no anti-Makabeh Patish. There's a malacha called fixing. There's no malacha called unfixing. However, there's a malacha called Boneh, and there's a malacha called destroying. So the antithesis of building is also a malacha. Seiser, destroying, is a malacha of the lamites. And we're going to discuss that in detail, exact parameters of when Seiser consists of a malacha, when it's asa d'Rabbanan, when it's asa d'Oraisa, and when it's allowed, as there's a general rule that states, hamakalkel pater, people who damage are pater. Only someone who does something beneficial on Shabbos does he transgress. But if you do something of damage, then it's not considered a transgression, which brings up the question of, if so, how on earth can you have a malacha which its entire essence is the idea of destruction, if destruction is never considered a malacha? So that's something we will deal with later on. If we'll get to it today, it's in this PowerPoint, and we will deal with it in the book. Okay, so let's begin. The three categories. We are going to learn three categories in regards to Boneh and Seiser, meaning there's going to be three types of structures that have three different types of dinim, of laws, regarding when and where Boneh and Seiser are transgressed by them. So there's no one shoe fits all here. You have the three categories, meaning the three types of structures, and those three types of structures each have their distinct laws that we will go through in the class. Number one is items attached to the ground. Items attached to the ground. That's our first category. That would include all the walls here that you're looking at. It would include the doors. It would include the air conditioners or heaters. It would include the Aron Kodesh. It would include these heaters attached. Anything attached to the ground. I think it's quite a simple. Are they attached? I don't believe they're attached. I mean, maybe they are, but I don't think so. I don't think that they are attached, but I think it's a pretty simple and self-understood category attached to the ground. Okay, that's our first category. It's going to have its own distinct laws, and as I mentioned already now, it's more severe. It is stricter. It is more severe. It will have the most severe laws. So anytime you are doing something, an action, to an item attached to the ground, you gotta light up the light bulb of the laws of items attached to the ground and its bylaws, which are going to be more strict than the regular bylaws of Boneh. Number two is vessels that are not attached to the ground, so they're technically movable, but they're large enough to hold 40 saw. We did do this. We did review this concept in the previous classes when we were discussing Tikkun Kli. And this is where we're coming to the main sugya of it, the main discussion of it, and that is that we give a similar law to anything that holds 40 saw. We mentioned before, who remembers why? Why is a vessel that holds 40 saw, which is the size of a mikvah, why is that considered similar in law to items attached to the ground, to building attached to the ground, a building, a home? Anyone remember? We mentioned this. Anyone remember that we mentioned this? So we said the following. The reason why a mikvah's minimum measurement is 40 saw is because that's the amount of water you need physically for a normal body to fit inside and be completely covered by the water. That's the amount of body of water you need to be immersed fully inside of it. So basically the point is that 40 saw is the amount of volume that a person can fit inside of that vacuum. So an item that contains 40 saw means an item that contains a vacuum that will allow a person to be inside. And that turns, in essence, the item into a building. As what do we do with buildings? We live in them, right? People don't live in things that can't hold their bodies, but people do live in things that can hold their bodies. And therefore, even though you can technically say, well, it's not attached to the ground, that is not the point. The point is not attached to the ground versus not attached to the ground. The point is living quarters versus non-living quarters. And we will define living quarters as anything attached to the ground or as any vessel, item that's large enough to hold a human body, which is 40 saw. Has a status of an oihel, has a status of a building. Number three are vessels that are not attached to the ground and are not large enough to hold 40 saw. So that's basically everything we pretty much are saying here: the bench, the table, the books, the stender, right, et cetera, et cetera. Everything here is under the third category. It has a more lenient approach of Boneh and Seiser, and there's going to be many things that are going to be allowed, as we'll see when we go through all of its bylaws. We'll learn exactly what are the parameters of making it a biblical prohibition, a rabbinical prohibition, and of course, just simply permitted. There will be a lot more cases that we will have permission by of building, but more destroying. Destroying is where we get to have our Shabbos fun, where we get a lot more allowances, as we'll see. This will, of course, number three, enter us into the discussion that we've mentioned so many times, and I said we're going to learn it later: opening cans on Shabbos, opening soda bottles, et cetera, et cetera. Likewise, fixing, persons fixing eyeglasses, any of the ideas of putting together, assembling parts of a vessel together will be part of this discussion in three. Items attached to the ground. Okay, we are in the next slide, discussing the first category. That's what we're going to do basically. Also, the book is set up that way. It goes through each one of the categories. I'm using my new version. You don't have it. It's not published yet. So I have a lot more information than you guys do. We have more questions, more discussion. So it's going to take a little longer than just page 55, 56. So let's begin. The Alter Rebbe writes in chapter Shin Yud Gimel 313 as well as 314, which are the two chapters we've been mentioning that are under the curriculum of Shulchan Aruch for these malachis of Boneh and Seis. So the Alter Rebbe writes the following, that any item, this is a translation, any item attached to the ground, I'm reading inside from your book, including vessels, even if they are not sturdy, contain the prohibition of building and destroying. And it's explained in, the Alter Rebbe explains at 3:14-17 that this applies even if the structure is a loose structure or an unsturdy structure, and I'll explain what that means. In general, we will see in category 3, which are regular vessels that are not attached to the ground, that there's a major difference in halacha between whether it is a full structure, a complete structure, versus an unsturdy structure, such as an example, a difference between a paper bag versus a can made of metal, made of aluminum. One is sturdy, one is not. One is crunchable very easily, and one takes some effort to destroy. Okay, so that's A, there's a difference between those two. And B, when we're discussing an item made of assembled parts, there's a difference in category 3 between lightly assembled vessels versus strongly assembled vessels or firmly assembled vessels. For example, if this stender right here, has 3 parts that I can see right now that are attached with hinges. Can I have it for a second? Now, this one seems it's pretty strong. Prime always takes the good quality stuff. This seems pretty strong, this one. So this would be a strong attachment. But try some stenders that you'll see it's wobbly, very wobbly. It's almost practically coming out. That's called a loose strut. That's called a loose attachment. In halacha, we will see that there's a difference in law between the two types. But that's only, why am I bringing this up now? It's category 3. That's only by category 3. In category 1, which is discussing structures attached to the ground, there's no halachic difference. So even if something's only lightly attached, and even if the structure attached is not a sturdy structure, any building act would consist of the biblical prohibition of Boneh. It's very strict, and we're going to see some live case examples where a person would think, oh, well, what already did I do? I did almost nothing. I just basically was mekarev, I approximated one item to another. How is that building? I didn't take a hammer and smash it in well. Nonetheless, by items that are attached to the ground, we have a much stronger severity of the application of the biblical and rabbinical prohibition of building and destroying. With that said, there is one case of heter that still applies even by items attached to the ground, and that is the second bar over there, if it's not made to last at all. While we are applying an unsturdy and weakly assembled vessels, weakly assembled parts prohibition to things attached to the ground, we will not apply a building prohibition or destroying prohibition to items that are not made to last at all. So for example given, I'm pulling out my file here, so just wait 1 minute. It used to be that, first of all, number one, ovens used to be attached to the ground. I don't know if anybody today has an attached to the ground oven, but that's how ovens used to be. They were a structure that was made into the wall. And, or if not made into the wall, they were built with cement and clay on the ground, and they became part of the structure of your building. You couldn't tell your movement. You couldn't tell, right, if you're moving, you couldn't take your oven with you. It wasn't possible. So ovens had a status of attached to the ground. Now, in order to achieve a proper cooking environment for the food inside the oven, what they would often do is they would have basically spachtel, cement. What do they call it to fill the holes in walls in English? Plaster, thank you. They would have plaster that they would make, or they would alternatively use flour and water, dough. And they would plaster that around the opening of the oven, and that would prevent any air from escaping and cook the food really nicely. Now, somebody did this on Erev Shabbos, so he has delicious cholent on Shabbos morning. Also, he has nice, hot, cooked, fresh chicken Friday night. Can you open your oven? Can you open your oven on Shabbos? Because you're breaking. You would have to take something strong and hit it. Yeah, it's sealed. Dough seals very well. Dough used to be one of the chosen items to fill up holes within homes, and that's why in Hilchos Pesach we see a whole bunch of discussion of cleaning the walls and scrubbing the walls, because they used to have chametz all over the walls. The whole wall was chametz, depending on how holy the person's house was, how many holes it had in the wall. But that's what was used. So this caused an issue regarding Pesach. In any event, when our discussion is, does it contain a seiser prohibition on Shabbos? And the answer is that it does not, because it is not meant to last at all. This plaster is not meant to last. It's not a permanent structure. In other words, while we are going to be stringent by unsturdy structures and lightly attached pieces to things attached to the ground, there's no heter there, we still will apply a rule that in order for there to be a prohibition, it has to be a lasting material. Now, what is a lasting material? For how long? What if it's meant to be there for a week? What if it's meant to be there for 24 hours? So basically, in general, it's in order to be not last at all, it's meant to be destroyed within the day. That's generally the rule. I'm still pulling out here the material to see it, but that's generally the rule. It's within one day. And in the specific case I mentioned, the Alter Rebbe there concludes that it's best that an adult Jew doesn't break the seal, and rather he should have a guy do so for him. And if there's no guy, he should have a child below the age of bar mitzvah. You're no longer eligible for that, to destroy the seal. Not because chas v'shalom we allow telling goyim to do malacha on Shabbos, or we allow little Jews to do sins, but because it's not really a sin, it's really mutter, but because of this whole how long does it last for unclarity, so just better to have it done by that. It's in other words, a chumrah for a Jew, an adult Jew, not to do it, so therefore we delegate the job to them. I'm sure that those won't have a fun time taking the hammer. They can use a hammer, right? Klishim lachtalis, are you allowed to use for a purpose, a permanent person. You can take a hammer, they can smash the seal of the oven, they'll have a great time, and then we can take out the food. Based on these rules, let us now analyze the following practical questions and answers that come as a result. You see, until now, what we just learned is very theoretical. Very theoretical. What am I destroying exactly attached to the ground? So now comes the cases where you have to start applying the information you just learned. So let's go through it together. You're about to sit down on the toilet seat, a not uncommon occurrence on Shabbos, and you realize that the seat is out of its hinges, a very uncomfortable position. Can you put it back in? Can you slide it back into the hinges? Now, how much effort is required to do that? Minimal, usually minimal effort. It's very easy. It's not such a big deal. Is it mutter to do? No? So what do you tell this guy? What do you tell the guy who wants you to go to the bathroom?
Squat. like the Arabs do.
So the answer is like this. Based on the laws we just learned, the toilet is attached to the ground. It's not a removable potty. If it was a removable potty, then we would have to enter category 3 bylaws. But this is category 1. And even though you can technically say, well, the toilet seat is a movable item, but it's attached to the toilet, which is attached to the ground. Now, is it meant to be removed constantly? Is it meant to last? Of course it's meant to last. So even a slight and minimal effort fixing would consist here of the biblical Boneh prohibition. Biblical Boneh prohibition. So it's forbidden. The one case that we can contemplate an allowance is if this toilet seat is so rickety that basically every time you go, it comes out. So it's never meant to last. Not because you don't want it to last, just that's how it's working. It's not working. It's practically, it's not lasting its 24 hours. So in such a case that it's so loose and every time you go to the bathroom, you put it in, and then when you get up, it comes out, then we can give a heter for it, because it would be similar to the case that we said before of not meant to last at all. Case 2.
Why is this not under the fixing? That would be, is that?
Why is it not tikkun kli? So this is what we've clarified a few times, that while in English, the word fixing can cover many, many different actions which sound similar, in halacha, tikkun kli has its own av malacha and toldes, and Boneh has its own av malacha and toldes, and they're separate from each other. So we said earlier, the difference is tikkun kli deals with mainly vessels that are not attached to the ground, such as this, or this, or this, while Boneh deals with things that are attached to the ground. But it's not, but it's that is not the maker, that is not the clear difference, because we will see Boneh prohibitions as well by items not attached to the ground. So, as I said earlier, tikkun kli will never apply to items attached to the ground. That is clear. So tikkun kli is solely applicable in a case that it is an item not attached to the ground and doesn't hold 40 saw. But Boneh can apply by both. It certainly applies by items attached to the ground. That's why all these cases are the Isra of Boneh. So somebody says, oh, it's tikkun kli, you can't fix the toilet seat. You tell them, no, you're wrong. They say, what do you mean? It's for sure Asr, it's Asr. You got the name wrong. It's the wrong law. It's Boneh. It's Boneh. It's not tikkun kli. Okay? But items not attached to the ground can possibly also have a Boneh prohibition. Okay? We're going to learn that later on. Second. Number 3. Anyone here have a tetherball pole at home?
Not anymore.
Not anymore, but you used to, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. Oh, I forgot to do the second one. I'm sorry. I skipped the second one. I'm going to go back to that in a second. I just want to open my OneDrive. Microsoft sent me an email saying that you can expect turbulence in the system because of the coronavirus. I just got it this morning. Yeah. I don't know, maybe because they're laying people off, and I don't know. I got a whole email from them.
Don't look.
Don't sit within 2 meters of that screen. You're in danger.
Well, you can't see it anyways, right? It doesn't show you the password. Okay, so let's do number 2. May one remove or attach the toilet paper roller that is removed from the socket for the sake of placing on a new roll. So this is an interesting question. I want to analyze this with you guys together. You have the same information as I do. I have no different halachic information to analyze it from. So the toilet roll is finished, and in most systems, which are of course attached to the ground, that's where we're having this question. If it's not attached to the ground, if you have one of those stand-up ones, portable stand-up ones, then of course there's nothing to discuss. We're talking about something that enters a socket. You take it out, put a new toilet paper roll, and put it back in. Can you do that on Shabbos? Take the toilet paper's finished.
This is obviously a trick question.
No.
You can't use toilet paper on Shabbos.
Very good. Okay. Very good. So this is where we learn from Rabbi Zera that you're allowed to ask theoretical questions, even though the premises of the question is faulty. Rabbi Zera, by the way, didn't get very far with his philosophy. They threw him out of the base medrash. Yes. But you guys are nice. You guys aren't going to do that to me. So I don't worry. Theoretically. And we discussed last week, by the way, that there are cases that push comes to shove, we allow using toilet paper, such as there's no tissues available. We said you do with a shinoi. We discussed last week, but you're right. In general, of course, there is no need to switch the toilet paper roll on Shabbos. Theoretically, would it be allowed? Anyone?
Okay.
Analyze the information that we...
כן. שזה עשוי, אחרי זה להוציא את זה, ועשינו לך, שזה נגמר.
So the minor student here says that it's permitted because it's meant to constantly be removed from the socket, have toilet paper put in, and then reopened. Does anyone disagree with that? Anyone else disagree with that? How long does a toilet paper roll last on the roller, usually? Hopefully more than a day. If not, see a doctor.
Well, your family probably doesn't.
But we have a few bathrooms. We have a few bathrooms. Kamashal.
Okay.
Right. So right, it would depend. So maybe say a shul's bathroom. But again, this is all theoretical because we don't use toilet paper on Shabbos anyways. But usually, especially during the week, it would last for more than 24 hours, which would enter us into the question of, I understand it's something that's meant for removing, and that's what it's meant for, but it's at the same time meant to last a certain amount of time. So that's why my ruling would be in this theoretical case is that it shouldn't be done. It's better not to do. It's better to avoid doing it because of, as I said before, we enter here into this issue of the 24-hour issue. That by some people it can last a week. It can stay there for a week like that in that situation. So how do we say that it's considered not meant to last at all? Further proof to this position would be the fact that even in the case of the plaster of the oven, we already said it's a chumrah for an adult not to do so, and the final ruling was to have it done by a guy or by a child below the age of chinuch, and that's in a case that it's really meant to be open already after Shabbos, after Shabbos enters, so it's not meant to last very long at all, and nonetheless we're stringent. Okay, so let's go to the tether ball case. The tether ball fell off its strings that is attached to the pole. May one reattach it? So the way a tether ball works, right? So there's a ball attached to a string that's on a pole, and if either the string falls off or the ball falls off the string, can that be reattached? It's a very simple attachment, very simple, effortless. No knots, correct. But is it not allowed or is it allowed? That's the question. What do you guys say?
It should not.
It's attached to the ground. Attached to the ground. We don't care of the effort.
It's meant to last.
It's meant to last, so it's awesome. Would be an isser of Boneh to reattach either the ball or the string to the pole. A hammock.
But you wrote seemingly when you had a Q&A.
Right. So
Seemingly.
This was in my humble days. In my humble days, I used to write seemingly whenever I didn't find it explicitly discussed the case. But I got a little more brave over the years. This is 10 years ago. This was written 12 years ago. So I'm a little more brave nowadays. But yes, I can use the word seemingly. Seemingly, based on the information we have, it should be forbidden. It should be forbidden. Okay? A hammock. So a hammock has a problem, of course, of attaching it to trees because of using trees on Shabbos. Not in this course, but it is discussed in volume 3 of my Shabbos books and brought in chapter 337, Shin Lamed Zayin. You're not allowed to have shimush, not allowed to do shimush to things attached to the ground. But let's say you have a hammock that's attached to a fence. That's not a problem. Theoretically, it's not a problem of using anything. The only problem would be, is there an isser of tikkun kli to attach the hammock to a fence on Shabbos? So here too, we would analyze that it would be dependent on whether it is meant to last or not meant to last. Meaning, if it's always attached to the fence, even if it's attached only loosely, we had one in our other house. We had like a hook that used to open up and you attach it to the pole. So if that's something that's not meant to, meaning that we would take it off after using it and then put it back on, it would be constantly. Then it would be under the heter we said earlier of the case of plaster. It's not meant to last at all, so therefore would be mutter. But if this is something that's meant to remain for a while, and you don't usually take it off and put it back on, then it would be seemingly under the isser of Boneh. In other words, that just because it's something that's meant to be removed and put back, doesn't mean that it doesn't contain a Boneh prohibition when you do so. I'll give you an example of the Chazon Ish used regarding electricity. Let me just get this open.
But if it was, there's freestanding hammocks, so that
what is a freestanding hammock? What does that mean?
It's a metal It's a metal bar and the hammock attaches to it, a frame, it's a frame, a freestanding frame. So that you would be able to, because it's not attached to the ground.
Oh, well, what are you doing with it?
Sure.
You just attaching the hammock, it's the same thing, you're attaching.
But the poles are not attached to the ground, so that's a kli, that would follow the kli law, and would not follow that would follow category 3 status. So there, yes, as I said before, there is a clear distinction between items that are firmly attached versus non-firmly attached. So yes, we would apply the leniencies 100%. Again, here the problem is specifically it's attached to the ground. Therefore, we have all these chubras, and what most people wouldn't even think should be an issue, but it is an issue because it's attached to the ground. In the case of the hammocks, as I said before, if it's something that's you put it on when you use it and then you take it off, then it should be mutter, as it's not meant to last at all. But if it is meant to last, even slightly, then it should be a problem.
But
this is the rule. This is the wording. I just want to show you guys the wording of the Alter Rebbe. This is the wording here. If the door is not made, he's talking about removing the door off a pit's opening. So if the door is not made to last at all, meaning it's not on hinges, back in the day, not all doors had hinges. It was just like you put like a plank in front of the space and then you removed it. So if the door is not made to last at all, then there is no destroying provision involved, neither in unraveling the rope or cutting it, and not even removing the actual door from it, unless as a case door revolves on hinges to remove it. Why? It says before, as it's not made to last at all. There's only This only applies by a door that is made to last in the pit and not to be removed on Shabbos. That's when he wants to open the pit, he unties the ropes and opens the door. It's not to remove the door from there as it is set to be there for some time. Or if it's not set to be there for some time, then it would be mutter. So this is where we're getting into our unclear state of all these cases. What is the some time? And as I said before, by the toilet roller, it's some time. So it's a problem. By the attached hammock, if it's going to remain attached for some time, it's a problem.
Right, but there's a distinction. So like the hammock, you can leave it can be attached or detached on an ongoing basis, but you can also leave it there. So it has
to do with what your intents are. How do you use it? What's your use? If you're a person who, it happened to fall off and now you're leaving it there for another 3 months, then obviously that would, even though you almost did nothing, all you did was put a hook on. That's all you did. It would still be problematic. With that said, we will learn that putting something on a hook on Shabbos doesn't always transgress a prohibition of Vaina. There are cases that it would be permitted, like a picture. We'll going to learn that later on. So don't take from what we're learning here that simply, for example, if I have a hand towel that remains on a hook for a week, which I think unfortunately is the situation right outside the store, and I suggest everybody not to clean their hands on it, especially now. Obviously, there's no minor prohibition involved in putting the towel there because you haven't attached anything at all. There's no attachment. It's not even a loose attachment. It's just hanging on something. But let's say by a hook where you're attaching it to a fence, you're basically putting it inside the fence and it's stuck in it, even though it's effortless to do so. The hook is hooking into the poles. Now, if there's a few different ways of doing it, possibly if it would be similar to just hanging it on a nail, then the stomach would be mutter because it's not attached at all. So it all depends on the form of attachment. Is it something that you're just hanging it on top of it, or meaning it's just resting on top of it and gravity is pulling it down, but it's not falling because of the nail that's stopping it? Or is there any attachment at all, even if it's effortless? So that brings us to the next case. May one attach a wall hanger or hook to his wall or door on Shabbos. So we have a number of different types of wall hangers and hooks. So let me explain what this means. First, let's discuss the suction ones, okay? There are suction hangers. You usually put them on shower doors and bathroom tiles. They work very well on mirrors. They work very well on those surfaces, obviously not in concrete. It won't stick. Or in car windows, you put them up. Can you put those up? So the building is obviously, the car holds 40 saw and the building is a building, and this is being attached to it. Usually it's meant to be attached for some time. It's not meant to stay there for a day. So this would be a Baina prohibition. It would be a Boneh prohibition, as it's similar to knocking a nail into the wall. And even though you're saying, well, I can just pluck it off, it's not such a big deal. Nonetheless, there still is a strong attachment. There still is an attachment here. There is an attachment here of its own, and therefore you cannot do it on Shabbos. The same thing would apply to a wall hanger. A wall hanger that you have to attach in any which way to part of the wall would be usher, even if it's very easy to do. The only types of wall hangers that would be mutter would be the types that you simply put on top of a door and it's just resting on it, as I said before. Simply,
Coat hanger.
well, they make, I don't know, we use it for towels and by
Yeah,
doors.
it just hangs on the door.
Just hangs on the door, exactly. There's no attachment, there's no nails, it's just gravity.
Coat wrap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The point is that you're doing zero attachment at all, not even suction, nothing. It's just gravity, okay? Right? The same way everybody would agree that if I took a book and I put it on top of the bima, I didn't transgress Boneh. Even if I want this book to stay here the whole week, I want the Haftarah book to remain in the bima the whole week. I did Boneh? Of course not. Nothing's attached. In other words, even when we said before that even loose attachments forbidden, things attached to the ground, don't get too excited about that rule. Don't get too far. Don't go too far with it. It doesn't mean that we're going to apply any touching is forbidden. Okay? So there has to be some level of attachment involved here. Obviously, if the wall hanger is being attached to a adhesive device such as glue, or they have these double-sided tapes, that would of course be a problem of Boneh to do that on Shabbos, or to replace it on Shabbos if it fell off. And that brings us to the question of a mezuzah. What do you do if a mezuzah fell on Shabbos? Ever happened to anyone? Never?
None.
Shh. Don't tell all the secrets. You have to raise your hand, just like in school. So, first let me deal with the Hilchos Mezuzah aspects of mezuzah falling. Technically, it's forbidden to remain in a room without a mezuzah. So, if you don't have a mezuzah by your door, you should find other sleeping quarters. Try to at least. Let's say you have 4 rooms at home. The mezuzah of your bedroom fell. Until it's put back on, you should ideally be sleeping in a different room that contains a kosher mezuzah. You're ideally not supposed to be living in a room without a mezuzah. But Shabbos, we have the problem of Boneh and putting it back up. Okay, so this is what we're going to analyze now. We're going to learn there's cases in which it's allowed and cases in which it's not allowed. Another side point, by the way, is that we say a bracha whenever a mezuzah has fallen off by mistake, which is usually the case. That's how things fall by mistake, meaning you didn't intentionally make it fall. When you put it back up, you have to say a bracha of l'kbaya mezuzah. So that's just a fun fact, side fact of Hilchos Mezuzah. But to the main point, can you put it back up? So let's analyze this together. If the mezuzah in the case fell, how did the case stick onto the wall doorpost? With something, a nail, glue, right? Tape, something made it stick. So how are you going to put it back on? It's not going to float in midair. You're going to have to attach it somehow with something. That something is a Boneh prohibition. So it would be forbidden to reattach. And even they're saying, but I'm going to have to move rooms. I'm not going to, how can I be without a mezuzah? I understand it's not the most ideal situation, but you can't transgress Shabbos to get the mezuzah protection or to get the mezuzah mitzvah.
What about magnetic?
Well, magnetic would be a shaila, bechlal if the mezuzah is considered attached. Now, it's a shaila in Hilchos Mezuzah. Is a magnetic attachment considered an attachment from the aspect of Hilchos Mezuzah? And I've never dealt with this question. And maybe I have, I don't remember at this second.
The magnet is glued to the case.
But if I remember, they made something like that, right? Is it you're talking about something that exists? You've heard of a mezuzah case that exists that works magnetically? You're just asking. I'm asking if you've heard this in the market.
The doorpost is metal.
Right.
The magnet.
Have you seen this in the market? That's my question. Is this? You're asking a theoretical question? Because I do have a recollection. I have a recollection of somebody asking me this once. I don't remember, but basically I have to look in, I have my files.
It can be removed easily, but yet it's intended.
Correct. The question is such a thing considered an attachment or not? Is a magnetic force considered an attachment? And the svara right now, I have to look up my files if I have this discussed, it would be that it is not considered an attachment. The same way
It's like
that
gravity.
exactly. The same way we will not say that gravity is considered an attachment. So let's say, I don't know, let's say in a spaceship, the spaceship has doors that are, well, no gravity in a spaceship. Okay, bad example. But, if gravity was forcing the mezuzah to be on the doorpost, that it's not attached to the doorpost, it's just being pushed to the doorpost.
Right. It's not gravity. It's another force of nature. The magnetism is different than gravity.
Correct.
Okay.
And this force is, the question is like this. And this is also a question about gravity that Rabbi once brought up. Can we really honestly prove scientifically that gravity is pulling us down as opposed to gravity pushing us down? We all know there's atmospheric pressure. That's a known concept. So, and there's a ton of atmospheric pressure, a ton of it. And that's why they have to be so careful. People who dive have to be very careful when they go up, not to get the bends, and people who space travel have to be careful when they come in. The atmospheric pressure can destroy them when it comes suddenly. So maybe atmospheric pressure is what pushes everything down. In other words, how do we know scientifically? How can we prove which direction it is? So by magnets, is it the doorpost that is pulling the mezuzah, or is it the mezuzah that's pushing to the doorpost? It's both. So if it's both, okay, agreed. If it's both, like a shidduch, like a marriage, if it's both, then maybe that's not an attachment. The attachment has to be that the mezuzah is being attached on its own individually to the doorpost, and not that the mezuzah is pushing itself to the doorpost. In other words, that would be similar to what I said before, that's the graph. In any event, I have to look up about this, but on Shabbos, a magnetic attachment, I proved in the new volume on my Sefer, that is not considered a Boneh or Seiser prohibition. We're going to learn about that later on. We're going to put magnets on fridges. It's not considered a real attachment at all. And it's similar to gravity, and therefore there's no Isser. The same way, as I said before, putting a book on top of your bima, or it's not right. It's not considered. Or if me to put something on top of this ledge, it's attached to the ground, and now it's sitting on it. Much weight. It's hard to lift.
Wait, did you say a magnet on your refrigerator?
Correct.
Would
not be considered Boneh or Seiser. Not everyone agrees with my approach. There are other Boneh or Machmir. Right, that's the point, because just like on Shabbos, we're not considering that an attachment, and therefore you don't transgress Boneh, and therefore it's mutter to do. So too, it's not considered an attachment for the mezuzah. So yes, you could put the mezuzah back on, but even during the weeks, it's as if the mezuzah is not there. So what have you gained? The mezuzah is not considered attached to the doorpost. It's going with the same approach.
It's not kosher.
In other words, yeah, you can do it, but the mezuzah is not up. If I have someone holding the mezuzah next to the doorpost, he's standing there holding the mezuzah. Nobody fulfills the mitzvah. It has to be there. It has to be attached, with to the actual place in a permanent fashion.
What happens if the mezuzah to your front door, to your house, falls on Shabbos? Are you not allowed to go into your house?
Well, again, I said ideally, most people in my economic situation don't have buddy homes next to each other, that I can just go into a different home. So you have no choice. If you have no choice, you have no choice. No one's saying sleep on a park bench tonight, or you don't have to knock on your neighbor's house. What I said is ideally, in a regular situation, the point of that halacha was put it up. Don't be lazy. Put it back up. Don't wait a week. But in a case where it's Shabbos and you can't put it because of halachic issues like Boneh, then in malasot. But there is a case that's mutter. Which case is it mutter? Just the mezuzah slid out of the case. The mezuzah fell off. So you have different types of cases. You have some cases where they have like a little bottom piece that keeps the mezuzah up, and if that piece falls out, the mezuzah can fall out. So if you're able to put that back inside without putting that piece that holds it, and it's able to stick there, to stay there, then you can do that on Shabbos, because you've attached nothing. You've attached nothing to anything. You just slid it back.
You can slide it back and put a temporary, like a little piece of paper in to keep it from falling out, so it's temporary.
Like a tissue, can you stick a tissue? Yeah, it's temporary, it's not made to last. The pashtus, it would seem that it would be mutter. But as you see here on the board, when I'm mentioning this halacha, so not all poskim agree with this approach. While everyone agrees that there's no intrinsic building prohibition involved in simply sliding a mezuzah, the actual roll itself, the parchment, back into the case, but they say maybe the fact that now you can live in the house is like fixing. When the mezuzah wasn't there, according to Allah, you're not supposed to live in the room. Now that you put the mezuzah back, you can live in the room. There's no greater fixing than that. Stop getting so involved in the glue. Is it glue? It isn't attached. Forget about that. You put a mezuzah back up, now you can live in the room. Is there any greater fixing than that? So some place can rule that because of this issue, you're never allowed to put a mezuzah back in, even if it's not attached at all. Practically, as I ruled over here, seemingly one may be lenient, so long as it does not involve the building prohibition, meaning, as I said before, you're not attaching it or sticking it in any which way. Okay, let me see if I had something here on magnets. This is okay, no, that's not on mezuzah. Okay, so I don't have anything on that. Okay, that was our last case. We're moving on to the next slide. So we're done now with category 1, which is vessels, which is building structures. We're moving on to category 2, which is vessels that are not attached to the ground but large enough to hold 40 saw. The rule. So the rule is that such items retain the same law as do any item attached to the ground. So everything we just learned about items attached to the ground, apply all that, do copy paste to all that information to here as well. As you see in the book, the Alter writes in chapter 313, Halacha 18, even vessels are not attached to the ground if they are large enough to hold 40 saw, meaning that their size is 1 cubit, which is 16 by 16 inches. Okay, that's not that large. Is certainly this beam over here falls into that, with a height of 3 cubits, which is 48 inches, including the walls. Then he writes them, it's forbidden. They're considered like a tent and carry with them the welding and destroying prohibition, which is basically the same as that of an item attached to the ground. Now, what about by unsturdy vessels? So let's see. So, just as we said that by items attached to the ground, there is no unsturdy vessel leniency, meaning the fact that it's not such good quality and doesn't last in permanency, doesn't make it any more lenient. So too by this, it would make no difference. So even if somebody made a bima, okay, of cardboard, he made a cardboard bima, which unfortunately in Los Angeles, that's some people live that way, in cardboard houses. A certain street in LA. Anyway, so it would carry all the laws. It would be usher. It would be usher to destroy it or to attach anything to it, even though it's just cardboard. Nonetheless, it's retaining all the laws of a building structure, which we ruled that even an unsturdy structure would be prohibited. So I'll give an example. You got a new fridge, and you have this huge box. That box holds 40 saw? Absolutely. Okay? Your kids are playing with it on Shabbos, and you know what kids do when they get to these boxes? They tear it to shreds. I had plenty of experience the past week with that. And so during the week, it's just a problem with cleanliness. But on Shabbos, those boxes are so big, they're considered their own structure, like a building, and to rip them is an isser of seiser. It's an isser of destroying on Shabbos to break them apart. Or to put them back together. Let's say the bottom came out and they want to put it back together to play with it. It would be a problem to do so on Shabbos. It's an unsturdy structure. It's cardboard, but it holds 40 saw. Contains the same laws as do buildings. Okay, questions and answers based on this, and we'll conclude today's class with this. May one replace the door of a regular fridge on Shabbos if it fell out of its socket? So anyone who's ever had a displaced fridge door, it's very annoying and of course very unhealthy for your food. And during the week, you try to fix it as soon as possible. what do you do on Shabbos? So since a regular fridge contains 40 saw, unless we're dealing with a tiny fridge, a mini bar fridge, it would retain all the stringencies of items attached to the ground, which would unfortunately prohibit us from doing any form of attachment at all to the door. So what you could do is move a chair there, or move something there that will make it not fall, but you cannot return it to its socket. You cannot do anything, even loosely and effortlessly, that will attach it back to its place. And number two, may one remove or replace the pole of the Aron Kodesh. So that pole right there, as you see, okay, if it fell off on Shabbos, can it be replaced? So my answer here would be that it would depend. Sorry?
It's meant to stay over. Wow.
Correct. It's definitely meant to stay there, but it would depend on how it's made. If it's like a hook, where it's just like you're hanging a towel on a hook, so it's just gravity is attaching it, then it would follow, as I said before, all the heterim of pictures, et cetera, which we have clear proof that it's not considered building. But if it's more sophisticated, like it's, you have to, some of them you have to put it in. It's like a hole, and then you slide it inside. It would already be a little more severe, because considered at least a light attachment, and therefore you would not be allowed to do so on Shabbos. The putting of the pareiches is a different question. It's a question of oihel. We're going to learn that in the next chapter, Shin Tesvav. Right now, we're just discussing the poles. Okay. May one insert a metal pin holder onto the bima in order to fasten the bima cover? So I've always had this question. This bima doesn't have them, but you may have seen some bimas, in order to prevent the covering from falling, they have these bima pins. Know what I'm talking about? Nobody knows what I'm talking about? They're like clips to keep your yarmulke on your head, but just thick ones and big ones and wide ones. And they put on the bima to prevent, the bima cover from always, the preichus of the bima from constantly slipping off. So is that allowed to be placed on Shabbos? Can you remove it or place it on Shabbos? The bima, as we said before, is considered like a structure attached to the ground. Their intent of the people doing this is for it to stay there forever. That's why it's there. They want it to be attached forever. So seemingly, based on the information we learned, it would not be permitted to be done on Shabbos, unless it doesn't do its job very well and it constantly falls off. It's not meant to last at all. Once again, you can do it, but then once again, why using it? You need to get a better one. You need to get one that actually works. So if it doesn't work, it's allowed, but if it works, then it wouldn't be allowed because it's meant to stay there, and it is considered a forceful attachment, even though it's very easy to do.
But if you put a lousy clasp on that won't last, it would be okay.
A what?
Clasp up.
Right, one that doesn't last at all. Again, it's meant to be constantly in and out. So it would follow the heter that only if it's meant to last some time and it actually does so, okay, then it would be considered. On the other hand, maybe we can argue that, hey, I'm not allowed to put, svarim on each corner of the bima so it doesn't slide off. For sure allowed to do that. So too here. What's the difference? Here I'm also using, I'm using a similar type of force, but it's different. One is gravity, the other is that you're forcing the pin into the narrow area, and that's what forcing it down. Okay, in any event, my general rule is like this. Not all these cases, as you've probably seen, there's a very clear-cut, 100% pure prohibition that way. It's clear just like all the other cases. Sometimes it's a little iffy. You can have a svara you can bring up a logic to differentiate, but since we don't have concrete proof that is the correct approach, in Shabbos we're stringent. In general, on Shabbos we take a stringent approach, especially by Isuri Deraisa, that just having a weak svara to allow it, even though it is a svara, since there is another counter svara to prohibit it, we would go like the former and prohibit doing so. Last case, and they want to remove the panel of a bookcase if it is resting on hooks. So what do you guys say? This bookcase holds 40 saw, so it's just like the bima. So I don't care if it's attached or not to the wall. It holds 40 saw. Can I remove one of these? The books, of course, you could remove. The shelf. Can you remove the bookshelf? So these obviously you can because they're screwed in. That's not my question. That's kind of obvious you can't.
Oh, there's some that grab.
Oh, some of them exactly just work with hooks. So similarly, those that just work with hooks should be allowed. But then you have others that they don't work with just hooks. They basically have a space you slide them into. There's like two hooks, and you slide them into the space. Those would seemingly be a problem. That's more of an attachment, and that would be prohibited to be done. Even in the case of the shelves that are just resting, as I said before, based on gravity, I don't know, there's something in my mind that doesn't feel right about that it's not similar to the picture case, but I have to develop that, yeah.
How does that make 40 some?
How? Take off all the shelves. You can fit 3 people in here. Take off the shelves.
It would hold 40 some water.
It would hold 40 solid water. Oh, it doesn't have to literally hold. It has to have the vacuum, the volume side. It has to have the volume of 40 solid. It has to have the empty space to hold 40 solid. No, volume, if, let's say I had a bima, let's say I had a wood box, that the space inside the wood box was, 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, then it wouldn't be a 40 saw item. You have to have an actual vacuum space inside, to put things inside of it. There have to be empty space inside the item to be used. But this certainly does fulfill that, and therefore this certainly would be under the prohibition. Okay, Mitzvah, next week we will continue from the 3rd category, and that's going to bring us to the main bulk of this chapter, of when there's a building and destroying prohibition applicable, things not attached to the grounds. But next Sunday, God willing, I wish everybody good luck on their tests. If you have any questions, you can let me know. You can also, for the net, I'll put up in the, for you, you're not in the class. So to review for this coming week, you should do from page 57 or 56, let's see. Do from page 56 in the book until page 69.
I had last Shabbos, we had this situation where the Moscow, the